Hello, and welcome to the mentorDINO podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Rosier. I am an architect and founder of mentorDINO. Join me each week as I speak with amazing professionals in and around the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, as we are all part of a larger interconnected community. We discuss everything from career stories, lessons learned, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, welcome to the conversation. And if you like this episode, please do me a favor by hitting subscribe, like, or share it with a friend. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own unique career journey. On today's episode of the mentorDINO podcast, I would like to welcome Greg Coudriet, principal and founder of Auxia Design in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Thank you, Greg, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so I always like starting out my loaded question. I know we've discussed at numerous CSI events and seeing each other throughout Pittsburgh, but if you don't mind diving in and letting my listeners know a little bit about your story through your experience and your education and your career so far.
Yeah, we can take a couple paths there, but just maybe as an overview, Auxia Design, we are a national acoustic consulting firm, and we primarily work with architects, but we also work with engineers and building owners to address all things related to acoustics, environmental noise, and vibration control in buildings. Mostly, the environmental noise control has some industrial elements to it as well. So it's an interesting little niche career. I actually have my education is in acoustics, and then I spent my entire career in that field. I personally worked at one firm actually for 18 years of my career, so it's kind of a rare thing these days. And then got to a point where I decided that it was time to jump out and do my own thing. So that's when Auxia started about 2.5 years ago, and it's been a blast ever since. So yeah, that's sort of the overview.
And so when you're, I guess like when I was in high school, like I didn't even know like acoustical design was a thing. Like you could think of
Not me either.
set design
Yeah.
or, those bigger things, but then you're more like, I always thought of actor, actress type of scenario, and then maybe just the scenes. So how did you discover acoustics as a degree or a path?
Quite by accident, to be honest. I mean, so yeah, going back that far, I was always kind of like a little bit engineered brain. I love taking things apart. So there was that side of me. I also really love music, right? So I play guitar then and play guitar now, and just was always really sucking in everything I could about music. And I think when I was in high school, all I wanted to do was go to college, join a band, and quit and like be in a band, right? That's a 16-year-old's dream, right? And so, part of that was tied up in a love of like recording studios. Like I remember I used to have these books and I'd see these like awesome recording studios and I would be like, wow, that's just like the most fascinating place to be. I just want to be there. So looking for colleges, I think I kind of wanted to do that, music or work in recording studio. But my parents were pushing me a little bit more towards engineering. So we ended up just looking at schools, and I just stumbled across the University of Hartford, which has one of the only undergraduate degrees in acoustics in the country. And it was like a mix of those things. I got to basically have like a music minor, but also be through the engineering school, which was where like my primary education was, and then get to play around in some recording studio classes. So it was awesome. And it just hit all these things for me that just made a lot of sense. So that's kind of how I got into it. And then I think, going back to that engineering mindedness as well, I think I always just really liked architecture too. I remember just being a kid and riding on the school bus and like looking at houses and like trying to come up with my own buildings in my head and that sort of thing. I never really pursued that. But then once I got into college, I started doing internships at other acoustics firms, and we're doing acoustics, and now we're doing them on buildings. And I was like, man, this is great. I just actually really like the design of buildings as well. So I discovered that it lets the field was letting me sort of marry this interest in sound and music and performance, and also like let me flex the engineering side of my brain and like play in architecture basically. Like I don't want to minimize your field at all, but like we get to like play in some really cool buildings, right? Like we get to help you with the design of awesome facilities and that sort of thing. So it just hit a lot of high notes for me. And that's kind of the rest is history, as they say. So I came out of school and have been doing that ever since.
Yeah. I'll say even architects have their passion sides. So
Yeah.
as much as we were chatting earlier, I was in meetings all day today, and you're my last one, and it's just those meeting days are draining. But it's like, okay, I need to go sketch something now. I need to go do something
Yeah.
else that like can get my brain going in a different
Yeah.
direction. Because when it's the all day meeting days, it's
Yeah.
tiring.
Yeah, and then you get to work on that one facility, or someone calls you up with a proposal about something for, and you're like, wow, this is really exciting. Like I can't even, like you can be so tired, and then you just immediately like you're writing the proposal and doing the design in your head already because the idea of some new facility is just so exciting.
Yeah, and also, for sticking with the education theme with
Mm-hmm.
another question, I know you found a path by kind of stumbling upon Hartford.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you find other professionals coming from? Like, are they like,
Yeah,
I could see so many different tracks and paths to eventually end up in
a
acoustics.
really good question, and it's quite the niche career. Um, I have always built my teams with folks who have gone through acoustics as part of their education. They're almost always music minded people who like were. I mean, you go back to the music thing. I meant to say my personal thing here with music too was like I got to music school and I was like, oh, I'm not good at this. Like I enjoy it, but I am not elite at this, right? And that's not going to be my career. And so I think a lot of the acoustician community is very similar. Like they love music or sound or something like that, but they're like, yeah, that's not going to be my career. Um, and so they end up in programs doing either through undergrad or graduate school doing acoustics. There are a lot of other people in the market and that don't necessarily have the same background. They might be product reps that have repped, like interior finishes, and they slowly make their way into acoustics. There are people with physics backgrounds, or some people come from audio production as well, so they might have worked in a recording studio. It's a little hit or miss with that, to be honest, because you are missing some of the underlying physics and acoustic background that you need for the career. And so I think what ends up happening sometimes is we can talk a little bit about this too, but like when you first take on a career as a consultant, you have to learn to be a consultant, and also as an acoustician, you have to learn architecture as well. Like if you're going to play in this realm, so you're learning to hone your skills as a consultant. You're learning the practice of architecture in every building system in a building, and then if you throw on trying to go back and learn the fundamentals of acoustics on top of that, it can be tricky. That's not to say that there aren't awesome acousticians out there who have taken other paths, but um, I think really some of the best acousticians have gone to school for that. And I should include in that people who were maybe in music production, got into the field and went, okay, I'm going to go back and get a graduate degree in this now because I really want to know the detailed stuff so I can be at the top of my game.
Yeah, because I think that would be a hard part of being so niche down is, if you're trying to hire more professionals or get more
Yeah.
acousticians, there's not that many of you out
No,
there.
we all know each other. I mean, there's a few professional organizations. I mean, it's almost like if you think of something like AIA Pittsburgh, where most of the architects have maybe worked together in the past and know each other, and everyone's pretty friendly with each other. Like that's the national acoustics community. Like we all go to a national conference and everybody knows each other and knows which firms. And actually, it's competitive, but it's a very supportive atmosphere as well. So.
Yeah, because I know we have a newer acoustician in our office,
Mhm.
but we also have other like IT groups that you've worked with in the past. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, yeah, I know Greg and I know this person, this person. They're all over. I'm like, how do you know all these people across the
There are a lot
country?
of us.
So,
Yeah, but there are some really good schools that are uh, maybe 3 to 5 really good programs across the country that are churning out really awesome young individuals with great acoustics backgrounds. So
yeah. And then I want to jump into you spent most of your career all at one firm before starting
yeah.
your own.
Mhm.
So I wanted to jump into being at one firm for 18 years. Not everybody does that anymore. Others jump around, but some people just really love their firm and they want to stay where they're at, no matter if they're a specific niche consultant engineer like you or an architect or engineer. So, do you have advice for anyone that loves their firm and looking for ways to expand their leadership development and growth within that
within
firm
your without leaving.
without leaving?
Yeah. Yeah, I think for, I can only kind of maybe speak to my own experience and how I've tried to push team members that I've mentored in the past. But I think in some ways you have to kind of like carve your own niche, right? You have to look for a path at that company that would be unique to you, something someone else is not doing, an area of your practice that is valuable to the company, but no one is really taking the reins on, right? And just start to slowly see if that's something that interests you, start to slowly see if you can develop that, right? And um, I think if you do that and you're following your passions, you'll be excited about it. And I think that will show to everyone. And I think your sort of excitement about what you're doing and what you're attempting to do outside of your specific assigned job task will start to shine and inspire other people, and oh, hey, look what this person's doing, that's really cool, oh, I went in on that, right? So I think that's one thing. The flip side of that is you have to be careful about the firm you're at too, right? I'm sure you've talked with people about this. Like that's all well and good at a really good company that's supportive, right? But you have to be careful that you're not doing that at a company who doesn't value you doing that, or doesn't notice, or doesn't support you when you're like, hey, I'm really interested in this thing that's going on in the building industry. I want to pursue, explore a little bit about how this impacts what we're doing, how we can do these things better. And you have a legitimate case that you're bringing value to the company by exploring that, and it falls on deaf ears, or they're just not interested. That might be a red flag sometimes. I mean, you have to be flexible. Not everything you come up with will be immensely valuable to your company, but so I think that's one way. And another way is is it's sort of a cliche, right? But where do you want to be in 10 years? And I've always just kind of looked at that question and been like, okay, yeah, what is the next step for me? Where do I want to end up? And then you look at those people that are in those roles, and like you start to question, okay, if I was in that role, what did I do to get there? Right? Did I start meeting more with clients? Am I now, if I'm in that role, am I a person who does some business development? Am I a person who's a really, really good expert at this one aspect of acoustics? But just try to envision yourself in your next step, and then look back and see like what are the things you need to do to get there. And that even works sometimes when you look ahead and you see that person, you're like, I don't want to be like that person because of X, Y, and Z. And here's how I would do that differently. And sometimes that inspires you, like, okay, I'm going to get there this way, right? And that's not to be disparaging to anyone, but you might just have a different path and a different idea, right? So I think that's good. And one other thing too is I've always thought, professional organizations, and you do a ton of this as well, is like maybe it's not a given that you're going to get all of your professional enrichment at your firm, right? There are other opportunities and avenues for that. There's professional organizations, there's networking events, there's all sorts of things that you can go to where you can be part of a community and have your contributions and your work valued in different ways, right? And at the end of the day, your company has a job to do to make money and complete projects, and maybe they can't support you in a pet project at one given time, but sometimes these professional organizations can. So I think that's another way to at least get fulfillment and get some validation from your peers. So I think that's a really interesting avenue as well.
Yeah, because those organizations can really fill holes, even
Mm-hmm.
if you're loving the project work you're working on, but maybe missing something. Even just expanding your network, having people to talk to. I know I'm not like crazy leading anything in any of the organizations I'm a part of, but I love attending the events and seeing how I can help.
Yeah.
And so it's okay, I'm going to jump do this. I'm going to make sure I make time and carve out. And I found those connections super valuable that then if I hit a snag on my projects, I have people I can call up, and it's not like I'm calling up a random person off a website. It's like, no, I've known you
Yeah.
for a
This.
couple years. It's a lot easier to make a call. And I've had that save my butt a number of times. So,
Yeah, and I think too when you're younger as well, like you could feel isolated too, right? Like you're the one young designer, and maybe you're not close with, maybe there aren't any other young designers, and you're not close with them, or they're just not your close friends at work or whatever. you can go to those professional organizations and run into your peers. They might work at a different firm, but suddenly you're like, oh yeah, okay, I have the same thing going on. How did you handle that? And then you get this validation that, okay, I'm not missing something here. I'm going down the right path. Or you learn something. Oh, geez, this person is, I don't know, making this salary, or like is really getting, this person, this other firm is really getting a lot of responsibilities, and I don't get those responsibilities. It can be eye opening too. So I think that's a great way to understand your career a little better.
Yeah. And I also want to focus in on you learning what you didn't want is also just as valuable as you discovering the niche you want to go down, because there are so many different avenues to take a career that
Mhm.
finding the don'ts or what you don't like doing can
It's really
be
important. Yeah.
super and powerful to help narrow down the choices to like start to figure out where you want to go.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree.
While you're at that first firm, you've stepped into leadership positions. How did you grow that team and mentor those professionals that worked with you over there?
That's a really good question. Again, in some ways I happened into it, but not entirely by accident. I think I ended up at the firm that I ended up at because I was in school, in grad school in Boston. And for various reasons, I decided at the end of that I wanted to come back to Pittsburgh, where I grew up. So there weren't a lot of choices in Pittsburgh, and that's not to say it's a bad thing, but also the firm was really small. And I was like, okay, I think this is an environment where I can gain a lot of responsibility pretty quickly. I'm not going to be waiting for someone to retire, essentially. So that part was true. I had some really great opportunities there, and was able to get into a leadership role, by working hard, but also by being at the right firm where I had the opportunity to do that. And then as it came time to build out our team, I don't know, maybe it's just my personality, but I just always want to see everyone do as well as they can and be happy in their career. And I don't know, just in any corporate environment, you look around and see people that are maybe disgruntled with their job, and it's just like, life is too short to spend 30 years being at a job that you're angry about. So when I would bring on team members, I just tried to model being positive and rising above that kind of thing. And I think that's tied up with just seeing the value in your career, and focusing on the positive aspects of what you're doing, and not getting brought down into that kind of thing. So I think that all kind of goes hand in hand with just wanting to see people do well. And I think from there, maybe it's just natural to mentor people. And I just really enjoy that.
Yeah, and it just makes it more natural too.
Yeah.
Like, you're not forcing anything as much as I tell people not everybody's a good mentor and teacher, and that is
Yeah.
perfectly fine. But it's more just having that kind of compassion for others and wanting them to succeed and help and stay positive.
Yeah.
That's can be life changing for not only a career but life in general, because you
Mhm.
tend to take grievances home after
Yeah.
work,
Yeah.
and so it can help you in other areas.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm probably also the type of person that just has to tell everyone about everything too. So if something worked for me, I'm like, I'm going to tell you about it. So that could be a personality flaw.
And being on the consultant side, and I'm on more of the design team side, do you have any advice for design teams, architects or engineers, on improving their communication skills with their consultants?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, just do it. Like definitely communicate. Yeah. I think you can elaborate on this too, but I think in a lot of cases, engineers and consultants are really busy, right? Um, in most cases, by the nature of our work as consultants, we have to take on multiple projects. Architects tend to work on maybe multiple projects, but you're working more on a smaller number of projects at any one time. So the downside of that is, your consultants and engineers might get distracted. They might be working on other projects, right? And so if you don't keep in communication with them, you might find you're getting up close to like the end of your CD deliverable, and where's my consultant, right? So I think regular communication is important. I mean, we insist on it. We're always trying to ask the next question, what's the next step, that sort of thing. But if you don't hear from your engineer or your consultant, that's not a good thing. Like, don't wait for them to reach out, because they might not, because they're busy, and they're juggling a lot of projects. Um, So do it whenever you can. And that got me thinking too, like finding the right cadence with those kind of communications is really important too. I'm sure you have experience of, some projects that have like a weekly meeting where it's just dead and it seems kind of pointless in some ways. It's really good to check in, but nothing's done. And I think people start to call into those meetings and they don't participate, or just they're doing other things, right? And you're like, why am I having this meeting every week, right? But on the flip side, you don't want to go too long either. So I think making sure you have those check-ins, but make sure they're valuable. Do one-on-ones. I think as a consultant, I find oftentimes those weekly meetings are very helpful to understand the overall project, but I would actually prefer those to be shorter and then have some kind of one-on-one check-in, maybe once a week or every 2 weeks or something like that, just to actually talk about specific items. Because then sometimes those weekly conversations get into like, now we're talking about plumbing for 45 minutes and everyone else is like, okay, this is fine, but
Yeah.
this could be handled offline. I don't know. I guess the other side of that is it is helpful sometimes when you listen in, you pick something up like, oh wait, you're running a plumbing line where, like, that's going to create noise. We need to know that. But so that cadence is important too.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's important. I try to teach that to the architects, like the young to be architects, I will say, because we have to be in all of the meetings. So we don't have theoretically as many projects unless you're working on a bunch of tiny projects. But if you're on a big hospital or skyscraper or something, that's your only project and that's all you're
Yeah.
working on. But the benefit is we're in all the meetings and we're thinking about the project 24/7. But consultants and engineers aren't always in those discussions when the owner wants to change and reorganize a whole area. I teach them, go let all of your consultants know, or engineers if you don't have any in-house. Let them know you're working on that area because the owner wants to redesign it. Because if not, that's going to be where they start their work. And that's
Yeah.
just luck of the draw. Or those weekly meetings have at least a mini agenda, even if it is a quick
Yes. Yeah.
check-in, just so everybody knows what's going on. And it's okay to cancel a meeting. It is fine. I always tend to cancel those meetings like the week of a deadline. Be like, hey, we're going to make the week prior longer to make sure we're all in check. And then the next 2 weeks, I'm not going to have this on at all.
Yeah.
And
Much appreciated sometimes for sure.
yeah. Or page turns with the owner. It's like, okay, let's get the engineer stuff on, or hey, have you not call in right away, or be
Yeah.
on call to, hey, I'm going to bug you whenever like you're going to be close. So then you're not sitting in a 6-hour meeting like I am, but at least let you get back to work and you can get something done. As much it is nice to kind of be a fly on the wall sometimes.
Yeah.
Understanding if you don't have time, but you can at least fit in the important components, can be
Yeah.
big.
One thing that I think actually young architects I see doing better than maybe older architects, to pay them a compliment, is, I've often noticed that, obviously buildings are getting more complex every year, right? They're just more, an expanding number of technologies that go into buildings, different types of constructions. I mean, if you went back to the 60s, like there were like probably three different types of construction materials you were using to build a building. It's an exaggeration. But now you have all these different materials and vendors and products and all these different things. And the systems are so complicated. Like a mechanical system in a building in the 60s was real easy, and now it's immensely complicated and tied into a building management system. And so, I think there's a sense of pride I see with like older architects that like they come from a pedigree where like they knew everything about that building, right? And I think younger architects have realized like, well, I can't know everything about this building. Like, how could I? So I think the one thing that young architects are doing really well is being able to recognize that and be like, okay, I'm not necessarily the expert. Let me go ask the expert, and not only just ask them, but try to engage with them and understand what they're telling me and why they're telling me that. So that's actually a good thing that I see evolving.
That is always good to hear because I always just try to like, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse when I just say like ask questions or
Mm-hmm.
find the professionals that know the information, which is why I like CSI, because there are so many reps and different niche professionals that are the experts that it's like, well, I don't know what's going on. I'm a little over 10 years into my career. I don't know everything, but I
Yeah.
need to be able to find the people that can help me find the answer, and I'll learn from it, and then I can work faster next time. But then I'll probably still bug you anyway.
Yeah. And if you have a good consultant too, they're going to take the time to explain stuff to you, and they're going to be open to your feedback. Like you shouldn't, if you're an interior designer and you don't really know a lot about acoustics, like you shouldn't be afraid to ask an acoustics question, because the acoustics person's gonna be like, no, that's wrong. Like that's not what should happen. If you have a good consultant, they're going to be excited to tell you about it, and not only and engage with you, understand why you're asking the question, and work together to find a solution that works for both of you. And I think that's the hallmark of a good consultant, is they're trying to understand what your priorities are so they can develop a solution that meets your priorities.
Yeah, I know. I'm always trying to learn so I can try to catch issues if I have to change it before going back. So
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, I made all these changes. Then you're like, well, none of this works anymore.
Yeah.
It's
We do that as acquisitions.
and I'm like, I'm sorry.
Guilty.
But jumping into more of the present. So I know
Yeah.
in 2022, you decided to start your own business. So how was that initial decision for you? Because you were at that other firm for 18 years.
Yeah.
What was that pull to start your own?
Yeah. It was a crazy thing to do, probably in some ways, but I'm so happy I did it. It was a difficult decision. I mean, I left a well-paying, comfortable job where I'd worked for a long time, and I left a lot of really great team members and friends behind to start my own firm. Um, so I didn't. So that, not to go into too much detail, but that firm was independently owned for a long time and was headed on a certain trajectory, and I was hoping to continue to expand my role at that firm. Um, in 2018, I think the owner sold to an engineering firm, and at that point, I hung around for 3 years to see, to explore that and see what things could evolve from that. And I also feel like even when you're not in the perfect situation, you're still learning things. You can still look around and learn new stuff. So like nothing's lost. But after 3 years, it just, for me, I realized that the company had taken a different trajectory that wasn't a good fit for where I wanted to be in the future. And I was at a certain time in my career. I had 18 years behind me. Hopefully I can retire early someday, but I might have another 20 years left of working, right? And so it was just like, am I going to stay in this comfortable job that I know how to do? That's not easy, but like I know the job, get paid okay, and just do this for 20 years, but not really be inspired? Or do I do something else? And I just took the jump, right? And yeah, I think, and for me, another aspect of that too, we were talking about mentoring before. Like I had an awesome team of acousticians, and I was finding that I wasn't excited about the future of where I was headed there. And it was really hard for me to then turn around and try to make other people excited about a vision that I wasn't excited about. So that was another reason too. I was like, man, I can't do that part of my job effectively, or how I would like to do it. So yeah, so it was a really crazy decision to make, but it was the right one for sure. Yeah. So
Because it happens throughout the AEC industry where bigger companies will buy out small firms, or just two companies will merge together, and that changes the firm culture. It changes the
sure enough,
direction of the company, no matter if you are the guiding company that bought out somebody else or the other way around. Because if you're on that initial growth, it's like, okay, maybe you went from one big office and now you bought out two other small companies. So now you're growing and learning how to have satellite offices.
hmm
Or you had that smaller firm feel, and then a large firm buys you out, and you're like overwhelmed. I didn't want to work at a large firm.
yeah, exactly, yeah,
And
yeah. And
so,
your career opportunities may change overnight in that case, right?
yeah,
In the type of work you're doing, and it can be good and it can be bad, and actually can be both. I mean, frankly, when we were purchased, we were suddenly working on some really amazing projects, but other aspects of it were inspiring to me. So it's interesting.
yeah. And even if you say, like, I know earlier it was, hey, what are your plans for the next 10 years? Even though that's your plans, you never know when a buyout's going to happen or a
Yeah.
recession's going to hit. Like
Yeah.
being able to evaluate where you are in the present moment and trying to reflect back on what that 10-year goal was. And it's, do I
Yeah.
still want that? And if it's not fulfilling me anymore because of a shift or pivot, or maybe you have to move cities or something, like there are shifts that may happen.
Yeah. And timing was so important too. I mean, looking back, part of you just makes the jump. You're like, all right, I'm just going to do it. Right. But maybe the back of my head, I knew this, but looking back now, it's like the timing of that decision was critical, because if I tried to do this, start a company 10 years ago, I wouldn't have had the right experience or contacts, right? I wouldn't have experienced the right aspects of how a business is run. I think most of my contacts at that point were junior engineers, or junior architects and that kind of thing. So while they may have enjoyed working with me, they weren't in a position to hire a company that I started. And I think if I waited another 10 years, my contacts would be like the people who were starting to retire and who aren't making the day-to-day hiring decisions of a firm. So like it just, I looked around and I was like, oh, wow, suddenly all the people that I've been working with for my whole career and kind of engaging with on a peer cohort level are principals at firms, right? And they're people that I've worked with and they know me. So that timing worked really well. Also, with having two children, I couldn't have done it while I had two young children. I had to wait until they were a little bit older, and also like I have a really great support network that I sort of stumbled on. Once I started my firm, I started just kind of meeting people. Maybe your antenna's up more, but you start talking to people and they're like, oh yeah, I just started a business too. And it was amazing to me, the number of people who were like, had just turned 40 and were like, and maybe it's a midlife crisis thing, but they turned 40 and they're like, I don't know, I got to make it. It's that I have 20 years left. Do I want to continue to do this thing for 20 years but time's also running out. So it's now or never. Right. And so I run into so many people who are similar ages as me who've started businesses, and everyone's really willing to share, and just had a great support network of people who can help me when I have questions and that sort of thing. So that has been a wonderful thing with timing as well. So.
Yeah. And as you're doing that transition and network, were you starting to create those stepping stones ahead of time in those connections, or did you like cold turkey shift over and then like, okay, go strong, I gotta go connect with
Yeah, it
everybody?
was pretty cold turkey. I mean, to be honest, I had some. I was exploring starting my own firm for a couple. I mean, I guess I'll come back to this, but yeah, for a couple months, I think, and then but wasn't quite sure if it was the right move, because again, it was a difficult decision. It was like, I'm really going to be stepping away from something that I might not be able to get back to. Um, it but yeah, one other thing that I found out after I left too is like, I think in my head, this was always something I was going to do. I was either going to try to like get to a leadership position at a firm I was at, or start my own firm. And I would occasionally talk to people and be like, oh yeah, would you want to start your own firm someday? And a lot of people said no. And they're like, I'd never do that. And I was like, wait, but I would, And so I started to realize like, maybe that is something that I never saw myself as like a huge entrepreneur, but like, it always occurred to me, like, why wouldn't you want to do that? And so when the time came, it was sort of like, okay, well, maybe I do have the temperament to do this, and why not give it a try? So yeah. And the merger thing too is really important too. I was watching, there's a lot of acoustics firms that have been bought up by engineering firms recently, in the last 5 to 10 years. And I've just been watching this happen, and watching these great firms kind of dissolve a little bit, and their mission goes gray. And I was just like, I can do this. I can do this better. So that was sort of my inspiration, I think. So.
Yeah, I feel like I see more and more acousticians around, whether they be in-house with a firm or they're smaller
Mm-hmm.
consulting firms, just because everybody's so sensitive to acoustics. And even post-COVID, just everybody, they want
Yeah.
their quiet space, but then if they're used to dead silent, like you can hear a pin drop. Like you need
Yeah.
to have proper acoustics that then you can be in an open office environment and it's not overwhelming to somebody. So,
Yeah, that's another timing thing too, right? Like I think a lot of, we talk a lot about environmental design, and just the whole environment that people are living and working in, and like acoustics plays into that in a big way, but people are open to that right now. So there's a lot of people are very open to it, which is another great timing thing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Have you found a pivot with COVID? Kind of transitioning where acoustics either is doing a lot more work now post COVID or different. I don't want to say people are reluctant, but it's almost like sustainability goals where sometimes the client's like, do I really need to pay for that type of scenario?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, it depends on the market, right? I mean, if you look at something like healthcare, I think that, people's expectations for that aren't necessarily changed because of COVID. Work environments absolutely are, right? Because people work from home. And that's one of the key reasons people want to keep working from home is because it's privacy in general. They have their own space. They don't, they can do, they're not being watched all the time, but also they have acoustic privacy. They can focus. There aren't people walking by their desks that they maybe don't want to talk to at any one given time, or there's not, there's someone on a phone across the way. They just can't ignore that phone conversation, right? Because it's loud. And so I think expectations there have changed quite a bit. And I don't know that from a space planning standpoint, the architecture world and building owners have necessarily figured that out yet, right? Because it's led to a lot of flexible work environments, right? Which is almost had the opposite effect, where it's like, okay, now you have a temporary desk in an office. It's not going to have high cubicle walls. You're going to have less space because it's just temporary, right? You don't need to keep your stuff there. And it has this impact of like taking people and cramming them in smaller and smaller spaces. And the closer people get to each other, the more noise disruption you have between people. And so then the answer to that has been like put phone booths in rooms or put more conference rooms. But that requires people to want to get up from their desk and relocate. The other major thing I think in an office environment too is Zoom meetings and web conferences, because prior to COVID, you went to a lot more in-person meetings, and now it's just a given that if you're on a project, you're hopping on a weekly call. And if you have 4 or 5 of those, are you going to want to get up every hour to relocate all your stuff to a phone booth? Maybe not, depends on who you are and how you work, but that's a complication. So
yeah. So I was finding what room I need to be in. It's gotten
yeah,
harder.
yeah.
And it's like, oh, where do I need to be? Okay, over here. I don't have to just like click a button.
Yeah.
Or I remember I used to like go into my conference room like at least 5-10 minutes early to make sure I was called into a meeting, because pre-COVID there weren't as many Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
And
It was like trying to figure it all out. And
it's like, okay, call in. Now I'm like, okay, click, done. Let's go.
I think
But
education's changed a little bit too, in that there's a lot more distance learning going on, right? So you need to have your acoustics of your room right so that your audio system can pick up sound and provide an immersive experience as well. Those are probably the main ones that were impacted by COVID.
yeah. Going with things you've seen, are there common lessons you feel like you're always teaching design teams on acoustics?
Yeah, that's another great question. And I get asked that a lot, and sometimes I think not from you, but I think the expected answer is like, what panel do I use in this room, right? Like, but the things I like to really point out are really high level things. And the first one is that acoustics matters everywhere, right? It's a critical element of the built environment, and it's not just concert halls and media production spaces. And to understand that, I actually do a lunch and learn session, and I try to start out. I'm trying to hone this set of slides, but I try to start out by just bring some context to your auditory system is one of our most primitive and fastest acting senses. There are direct neural connections from your ear to your brain that act and elicit stress responses and all sorts of other things that happen immediately before your conscious mind ever even knows that they happened, right? And it's kind of like comes from a fight or flight response. If something happens behind you and there's a noise behind you, like have you ever had something fall on a shelf behind you and you like react before you even realize what happened? That's because your ear is able to pick that up and cause your muscles in your body to do something immediately. And so that's sort of at its strongest. But at a weaker level, every time your body senses noise, your auditory system's constantly scanning your environment and going like fight or flight. Is this a friend or an enemy, right? And so that has a lot of impacts on people. One of the major ones is sleep deprivation, right? And it's not just that people are waking up, But if you go into a busy city like New York City, and this is even true for people who claim to be, like, I love noise, I love all of the busyness of the city. When they do sleep studies on those people, they see that they're constantly getting sort of shots of cortisol and stress hormones while they're sleeping. They might not wake up, but they're not getting restful sleep, and they're constantly getting those stress hormones. And that's been linked to heart disease, diabetes, all sorts of other ill health effects. So that the WHO has actually identified noise is a huge factor in people's health, primarily through sleep disruption and sleep deprivation. That's also a big thing in healthcare as well. If you're trying to recover in a hospital and you're constantly getting these stress hormones while you're trying to recover, it's not good for your recovery. So that's a big way in how acoustics impacts you everywhere you are, right? Whether you're in a concert hall or not, in your day-to-day, in your office, are you in a stressful, noisy environment? That's impacting your health. And then the other aspect of this too is you as architects create these amazing spaces. You guys expertly balance aesthetics, color, light, form, and you create these sense of space. And so that, in your perfect world, you walk into a room, you're like, I am at this space, the entrance to this building, and you learn so much about what the space is going to be and what your expectations are walking into a building. But those are all some of your senses, right? And your acoustic sense there is sitting there going like, do I want to be in this space? Is it uncomfortable, right? And I think it's such a shame when you guys do all of that work to make these amazing spaces and you walk in and it sounds bad. Like, and I would say that in two ways. Like, let's say it has a noise problem. You walk into this beautiful atrium for a student center and like there's a rattling noise on a diffuser, or like you can just hear this low frequency hum from the air handler. Like, it's just such a shame because it doesn't fit with the aesthetics of the space. And the other way that can happen too is, let's say we take that same student center, and let's say you and I are in there having a conversation, but it's really reverberant, and not so much that we can't hear each other. That's a problem too, but we can hear each other, but there's just a lot of acoustic reflections going on. And someone comes in, they're kind of like talking loudly on their cell phone. Again, our brain is like scanning that. Like, is that, is that person yelling? Are they mad? Is something going to happen here? Right. And it distracts us and it makes it hard to have a conversation. And the end effect is it's just not a space. We might not even consciously process this, but it's not a space we want to be in. We walk in and we just kind of have this feeling like, I don't want to hang out here. Like, I don't want to be here. I feel exposed, or something sounds funny. I just don't want to be in this room. So I think it's a shame too. We create these awesome architectural spaces, but they have a noise problem and like people don't want to be in them. So that's a really long digression, but I think that's one of the main lessons is like, it's not just your experience I think the two main things architects will think about are, I have a big atrium, it'll be reverberant, I need help with that. Or I have a lecture hall or a concert hall or a performance space, I need help with that. It's everywhere. It's not that every room needs to be designed. Like, a conference room doesn't need to be designed to be a concert hall or a recording studio, but it needs to have the right environment. Yeah. And it has to match too, I should say. Like, you also don't want an atrium to a building to be dead, right? Because that's terrible too. Like, it's real quiet and you feel like you're in a library. Like, you don't want that. You want that space to be vibrant and match.
Exactly. So. Yeah. Like as you were talking, I'm just like thinking of all these situations I've been in, like the Children's Museum in Pittsburgh. They've got I think they call it the Red Room, and they'll have these giant like light fixtures throughout. And I attended a wedding and I couldn't hear the person next to me. And it was just all the hard surfaces. Or breweries are a great example. As much as I love going to breweries, there's so many hard surfaces because you want that like concrete floor look, so it's all cleanable. You have all the wood surfaces. There's nothing soft in the space. Then they just try to throw up burlap and all these different things. I'm like, that's not how this works.
It's really tricky with restaurants and venues like that too, because they have such a shoestring budget oftentimes that they can't.
And having open ceilings, like, as much as if people like the open ceilings, then you have a whole nother set of acoustical issues between the HVAC system running and the acoustics going up through there.
And that's a really good point too. So that's like the second thing that I'm always trying to impress on people is, the natural thing to think is, and you could tell me, like, you probably took some acoustics course in architecture, right? And I'm sure one of the things they talked about was like reverberation time. I think that's the main thing people think of when they think of acoustics, is like, how does the room sound? Is it reverberant? Do I need panels on the walls? That's one aspect of it. The other two major things that we spend the majority of our time on or sound isolation, how the building's built. Do we have sound transfer issues between rooms, between floor ceiling assemblies? And then what type of noise is the mechanical system making in the space, right? And sound isolation, if you have poor sound isolation, that doesn't work in a lot of spaces where people are trying to sleep or concentrate or learn. And same with mechanical system noise. That can make it impossible for two people to communicate and have good speech intelligibility. And, another aspect of that too is, maybe this is a separate lesson, but if you're a person with a normal standard hearing threshold, right, you're able to understand speech in a slightly noisy environment. That's not the case for a lot of people. A lot of people have some level of hearing degradation, and it's really difficult for them to hear speech and understand what someone's saying in an environment that's slightly noisy or slightly reverberant. So that lesson is kind of, if you are a person with a standard hearing threshold who doesn't have any of those challenges, don't assume that it's okay, it's good enough, right? That doesn't work for a lot of people, right? So you have to understand that different people have different hearing thresholds. So
Yeah, because I know if I've had mentors and other professionals that have hearing aids, and if I'm trying to go out to lunch or anything, and I know they have a hearing issue, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to pick these restaurants.
yeah,
Or
they're hard enough anyway.
Yeah, or my dad had a car accident, and I had to remember this as a kid, because I would go around the table to tell him a secret, and I'd always go to his bad ear because he had gone through a car, so he had one ear that was bad, but the other one he could hear fine. So it's always his right ear was the bad one, and I'd have to go around to his left. That I knew if I was in a restaurant,
you had to sit on that side.
yeah, and especially as he's getting older, I'm like, okay, I need to make sure as I situate. I'm like, I hate to be so anal attentive, but it's almost as much as if I go out to dinner with a military vet, they often want to sit in a seat that they can see the exit.
Yeah.
And it's okay if that makes you comfortable because of fight or flight.
Yeah.
I am going to do it that way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly. So a couple other things, if you want a few more, I'll make these quick. One is that just I think a lot of interior designers are probably scared when they think of acoustics. They picture a burlap panel hanging on a wall. There's so many finish options these days. So acoustic doesn't necessarily mean your space has to be ugly. There are so many cool materials that are wood and stone and plaster that offer acoustic performance that we can use. So we can actually do really cool things with acoustics instead of ruining how your room looks. The other thing that's really important is just engage acoustics early, right? We oftentimes run into these situations, I think, where someone will have a project and they'll think they have an acoustic issue, and they'll go, well, let's see how it goes. Let's let the project develop a little bit. And if we still think we have a problem during CDs, we'll bring someone in. Right. And that's really tricky, because we honestly do some of our best work at the beginning of the project. And if you think about sound isolation, let's just say you have, some spaces in a building, one of them is really noisy and one of them is really quiet. You're trying to shuffle the building around and you're moving suites around, and maybe kind of in the back of your head, you think oh, well, maybe this isn't the greatest adjacency, but it makes its way through, right? Early in the project, we can say, hey, look, you're considering 3 different floor plan options. Just be aware that option A has presents these issues with acoustics, and you're going to need to do something, this type of conceptual solution, and it's going to you're going to need a budget for those solutions, right? So you can do A comes with this additional cost, B is great, and C is somewhere in between, and we would help you identify those costs. And maybe that conversation is just, oh, okay, yeah, wait, we could move this storage space in between these 2 rooms. It's really a simple example, and then we don't have to spend any money on a specialty acoustic wall, right? If you don't do that, now we're in CDs. When was the last time you had a project in CDs that was under budget? It never happens, right? So now you ask us to help you. We can't move rooms at that point. We can't reroute mechanical systems. The only thing we can do at that point is recommend expensive Band-Aids, basically, right? We can't help you avoid the problems. We can only help you add stuff to the project to fix it. So that wait and see approach can be really challenging. And so always engage with acoustics at the beginning, and we can help you identify those issues and plan for them. And then when you get to CDs and you have to build an acoustic wall between 2 spaces that you couldn't move, it's not a surprise. Everyone's on the same page. Oh yeah, that's that thing we had to do, right?
Yep.
And it doesn't stress your budget, and you can make informed, intelligent decisions instead of kind of being under the gun and having a bunch of bad, expensive options to choose from. So
Yeah, I've even had to put ceilings above ceilings to eliminate noise because of where ductwork was,
yeah,
where plans had to go, and they needed to be high STC walls. And it's like, okay, I got to do something. And it's then you have your Navisworks professionals being like, you have two ceilings over here. I'm like, yes, I know I
yes,
have
I
two
know.
ceilings. This is why. And it's going to keep coming up as an error, but it's not. It's
Yeah,
purposeful. Or I've had mechanical contractors come through and be like, I don't know why the engineer designed it this way. I'm going to redesign the whole thing in the shops. And I caught them in a pre-bid meeting. I was like,
oh
no,
no.
this is
Well,
why, because of acoustics, and we were putting all the mechanical and going through the same wall as the door because the door already compromised the wall. So
yep,
let 3 pure walls and 1 be the issue, which then made mechanical harder to get in. The corridors were a lot more packed, but it's
yeah,
giving them that information to teach, so then you don't have the contractor redoing work, then want to charge you money for doing shops twice.
yeah,
And, sometimes
yeah.
there's hidden reasons.
Those space planning things are really important too, right? Yeah, again, to figure out early. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so CA and submittal reviews and shop drawing reviews are so critical, right? Because you can design these really great acoustic solutions. They could be undone in a hurry in the field. So,
Yeah.
you bring up another good point too, which is like the worst extension of waiting is waiting until the building opens, because
And
like
then it's an issue.
let's see if it's an issue. Like I think a lot of times people's intuition's right. Like if you think there's going to be an issue, there's probably going to be an issue. And like now try to fix a sound isolation issue in a finished building, like without disturbing paint and ceilings and mechanicals. Like no one's gonna be happy about that. So
Yeah. And something I always ask, as companies that I talk to that don't use their own name, is where you came up with your name. So where did Auxia Design come from?
yeah, so I spent way too much time thinking about the name of my firm, but maybe it was a reaction a little bit to what I saw going on in the market of firms being acquired, and just people who spent all this time, put all this effort into developing a firm that they had a vision for, only for it to kind of just disappear, I guess, right? So part of that was like I want to create something that's going to outlast me. Like my long term goal is for Auxia to exist after I'm gone, right? And have a plan in place for other people at the firm to take over, right? And have a great succession plan. And so that's the main reason that the company doesn't have my name in it. And I was at the same time too, I'm looking around at architecture firms, right? And how many 3-letter architecture firms are there named after people that no one knows who they were, right?
Yep.
And I've even seen architecture firms trying like coming to grips with that and sort of trying to change their name to something that isn't 3 letters of someone that hasn't worked there for 50 years. So that was one reason. And then Auxia is a made up word, but I was just messing around with different words, and I came across auxilia, which is sort of a support uh, battalion, right? Like it's like Latin for support, right? So, and I like that idea of like our company is here to support other people with our expertise, and so we do acoustics. That's our primary discipline, but one of my main goals is just to create an awesome place to work where the people that work here are supported and they're inspired to do the best work they can do, and that really we exist so that to provide them an environment where they can get the most out of their careers and they can just be inspired every day in what they do. And so to the extent that I am successful in that, and there are other experts who are outside of acoustics that would benefit from that, like we would bring them on, no questions, no hesitation at all. So for me, a lot of it is about being that environment for awesome people to do awesome work, regardless of what their particular expertise is.
Yeah. And I know you've already even started growing your team because I
Yeah.
met some new team members at
Yeah.
the CSI holiday party. So how was it like hiring your first couple employees, and where do you see
Yeah.
Auxia Design coming in the next couple years? I won't test you on 10 years.
Yeah.
So,
It's a little like when you first hire someone, it's a little frightening and it's relief at the same time. I've been fortunate enough that things have gone well enough that both times I've hired someone, I was kind of getting an inkling that it was time. And by the time I hired them, I was like, whoa, that was almost too late, right? Like we had enough work that we were just so, in fact, my first hire, he started in like the first couple of days. Introduced him to the company. I was like, okay, I'll be back with you in a day or so. Cause like, I'm so buried. I have to finish these couple of things and get them out the door. So while it's frightening, it was actually kind of easy in several cases. That was our first designer. So I also have, we have an awesome BD and marketing person who's actually my first hire, which was a great move, I think. so, yeah, and I have been fortunate enough to work with some really awesome people. Another cliche, like hire people who are smarter than you, and I have a team of people who are way better at their jobs than I am. So it's wonderful, right? And I've been fortunate that all the people that I worked with right now, I have worked with for a number of years before Auxia. So most of their orientations were like, "Hey, how you been? How things? Like here's how we're doing this. How are we doing that?" And there wasn't a lot of explaining, what in the industry or what our goals are. I think we all have a very common set of goals and aspirations, so it's been great. And I mean, I really do have just an incredible team, and that's one thing that's been interesting about starting a company is you put so much effort in the first year. It's just you, and like you're coming up with everything that has to happen flows through you, like. And I've had some really interesting uh, periods this past year. I'm like, wow, that happened and I wasn't involved. Like that was really cool. Like these two people did something and I didn't have to get involved in, like, and they're now developing things that are beyond what I had even originally envisioned. Right. And so that's just such a cool thing to, like, you're spending so much time on this vision, and then just to have some really awesome people come in and like see that vision and make it their own and start growing it. And it's just so rewarding. So
Yeah. And it's catching that your first hire was actually a BD hire and not like a young professional. That's something I've learned through conversations with others that have started their own business is, sometimes that everybody wants that first hire to be that like college graduate that can just be the cheaper hourly rate and just try to knock out things. But it's really that first hire should actually be that counterpart that can help you expand or grow or fill a gap that
yeah.
is not your strong suit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've always done BD stuff, but I am not an expert at that. And like, and it's really hard. I would say too, it's not the thing that, if I have like a design thing and a BD task in front of me, like I'm just naturally going to kind of go towards the design task. Like it's not the first. Certain days I go towards the BD stuff, and I love to talk to people, but it's just not my right at the front of my nature, right? So yeah, having someone to help me with that has been invaluable for sure. And one other thing that has helped too is, for me in particular, I never wanted to be a sole proprietor. Like I want to build and grow Auxia, and so that has been really helpful in so many decisions that I've made, to just kind of disassociate and go, if I'm struggling with a decision, okay, what is Auxia 10 years from now? Like, do we have this person? Yeah, of course this person works here, right? Like, so yes, I have to hire them because this Auxia in 10 years has this person working there. Or like, do we buy this software package, or do we invest in this? Like, yes, of course, if we're like a leading acoustics firm, yeah, we have this stuff, right? This is what we do. So that has been a good tool to like sort of disassociate from your own personal worries about things and just look at where you're headed and be like, yep, that fills that hole right there. So, and so BD is absolutely one of those things I've just seen, in throughout my career, how important that is to keep the faucet flowing for new work. So that was just such an obvious hire, and Eloise, who works with me, is just incredible. So.
Yeah. And I always like wrapping up my podcast with this final question. And it's, what advice do you have for young professionals just starting their career?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think ask a lot of questions and listen to everything, right? And listen to stuff that you don't even think might apply to you, right? I think this might be unique to acoustics, but we have to know so much about every aspect of the building, because any system in a building can particularly around sound isolation, can cause us problems, right? And so if we're going to tell you to change the construction of a wall, like we need to know everything about how walls are built. If we're going to tell an interior designer how to put materials, we have to understand what their aesthetic priorities. If we're going to now go tell a plumbing engineer or mechanical engineer to change something in a building, like we need to know how to speak plumbing and mechanical engineering. And then we need to go on site and convince, a contractor that we know what we're talking about and we understand their challenges and how they're building a building. And we're not just saying, hey, do this thing that I drew on paper that you can't actually build, right? So we benefit from knowing all these aspects of buildings and design, right? And for me, I was able to gain that skill just by what I was complaining about before, but by sitting in meetings where, there's 20 people at a table and I'm in the back, like in the second row, but I'm just listening to two people argue about a duct for 20 minutes, right? But listening to those conversations just helps you understand what everyone around the table, what their priorities are, and what they're trying to accomplish, and the terminology they use, and how they work. And I think understanding all that, whether you're in acoustics or architecture, has to help you, right? Because as an architect, you have to talk to those same people and understand what they're trying to accomplish too. So I think that's a really, really big one. Just listen and understand where people are coming from. I think you just have to be patient too. That's probably like, I know this is an area where you spend a lot of time helping young professionals like understand their career development. But, I think just obviously I was the epitome of patience, staying somewhere for 18 years. Right. But, you have to, not every day is perfect. Not every day is super exciting, and sometimes you hit an early point in your career where you just have to kind of grind stuff out, and you're going to be the one who's there late at night combing through drawings. But, take it as a learning opportunity sometimes. Like that's where you're going to learn all the ins and outs of a building, or like if you're on site for a long time, like that's where you're learning how a building's built. So, and you may have big aspirations for your career, but I think with architecture, it just takes experience, right? It's not something you can learn a lot, but it's something you just have to be experienced at over the years. So it takes time, right?
Yeah.
And the flip side of that is, I would never encourage someone to leave a firm like every 2 weeks because they're just not happy with, they're not listening to me. Well, sometimes they're not going to listen to you. But also, yeah, make sure you're not like in a toxic work environment where you're just slaving away and no one cares and no one's supporting you and understanding that you're grinding it out and you're making sacrifices for your career.
Yeah, because there's definitely a difference between toxic and grinding to get
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
what you're doing. Because if you hop around to firm every year, you're not going to, for the most part, you're not going to see a project from start to finish unless you're in a really
Yeah.
small firm that does really small projects, because that's when you learn your mistakes
Yeah,
and your
exactly. Yeah.
failures. You got to see it in the field. You got to see
Yeah.
it trying to get built and be like, oh, that didn't work how I was
Whoops.
intended. And
Yeah.
so when you jump too much, you miss out on learning opportunities that you almost are skipping steps. So the patience is important, but understanding, okay, if something's wrong, like it
Yeah.
is okay to leave.
Yeah. If you're eyeing a leadership career at a firm, like you kind of have to stick around long enough to see how the business runs, good or bad, and understand, again, what role marketing and business development play, whether you're going to do that or not. You need to understand how that works, how the finances of the firm work. Yeah. And if you're in and out and only focused on just your design work, I mean, that's fine. If that's what your passion and that's all you want to do, that's great. But if you want to explore other aspects of firm leadership and things like that, I think you need to be in there. Learning those things. And maybe another thing too is, I'm going to like contradict myself here, but like, pay attention to your own career as well, right? And while I think it's important to stick out, find a good firm and stick with them wherever you can, even when you have a really good mentor, they can only take you so far, right? They can open amazing doors for you, and they can inspire you and all sorts of things, but eventually you have to know where you want to go, and you have to take the steps to get there. And so you have to know, you got to pay attention to your career, where you want to go, I think.
Yeah. Nobody's going to drive your future. It's up to you to
Yeah,
figure
absolutely.
that out and like,
Yeah.
take the wheel and drive.
And even when they want to, like, I think I see a lot of people with really good intentions to mentor people, but they're also in a really busy work situation. And when the rubber meets the road, they don't have the time to take you to plan to take you to all the events and, teach you about everything. So,
Yeah. And if anyone wants to get a hold of you, wants to talk to you more about either going into acoustics or have Auxia Design on their design teams to help out with their projects, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm always happy to talk to anyone about anything, honestly. In fact, oftentimes when even young people who are looking for jobs, like I've always done this when they send a resume. Like if we don't have an opening, I'm always like, we don't have anything right now, but give me a call. Let's talk for an hour about the field and where you need to be. So I'm always happy to do that. And as far as professional connections on projects and things like that, I'm always happy to talk about those too, right? If it's something that is worthy of a project, that's great. If it's not, and someone just needs, some advice or someone to talk to, we're here as well. So you can get in touch with us. Probably the easiest way might be, not to read my email address out, but our website is auxiadesign.com. And you can go there and find contact information for me and all of our team. So.
Yeah, and I will put the website down in the show notes, so it's an easy one-step click for everybody to be able to get a hold of Greg and anybody else on your team for any questions they may have on acoustics. But thank you so much, Greg, for taking the time.
Thank you. This was wonderful. I really appreciate it.
I know we've been trying to do this for a while, so I was excited to get it in.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.